Hello, my name is Josie. I'm a visual artist who currently has some paintings on the walls of the Royal Overseas League at the moment, and I've also been teaching life drawing there over the past year. Um, ROSL at home have asked me to produce 2 videos to help us stay creative during this period of isolation. Um, to engage with these videos, you don't need anything specifically. A pencil and a piece of paper would be great, but if you just have a biro and the back of an envelope, that is also totally fine. So this video is going to look at portraits, specifically self-portraits, but before we get into that, I'm just going to give us some tips about portraits in general and the structure of the face generally. So one thing we're going to look at is where certain things are placed. Faces are incredibly individual, but we can use our knowledge of generalizations to see where individuals deviate from those in order to get closer likenesses. So one of the first things I'm going to ask you to consider is where your eyebrows are. Now, if you're looking at someone dead on, they're about halfway up the face. But they will obviously change if you're looking at someone whose face is tilted or elevated, and they have a relationship to the ear. Just going to use a biro here to show you that you can use the ear often to place the eyebrow, and I'm looking at the top part of the eyebrow there, and then on the back of the skull, if you just feel around the back of your head where your hair stops, you'll feel a boniness, and that's kind of that whole line constitutes the sort of equator, let's call it, of the globe of our face. The other very, very important line to begin with is this line, the midline, let's call it, of the face, which runs down. Some people have a parting, it comes right into the philtrum. You can follow it all the way down to the pit of the neck. You can actually follow it all the way down to the belly button, but we won't go into that today. So other important lines, we've got a cross, which we can use to tell the viewer where the head is facing, where we're looking at it from. And we're going to go a little bit further. We're going to now look at thirds. So another thing we're going to look at is where the point of the eyebrow is. This is kind of the front of the forehead, and then we recede. If you actually just touch your own face, we recede very fast back. We come down the point of the eyebrow and we come into there's a highlight usually. You can see it actually very clearly in the light here. This is the bottom of the eye socket. And this is coming out. This is why this is catching light, and then we fall off. I mean, if I was, a lot of people have more cheeks here, so we don't fall off that steeply, but you can see in skulls, there's a real concavity there, let's call it, and that can come down to about here. And the other thing to notice is where the neck is in relation to the head. This is quite a variable width. For example, on me, I would say it's just slightly outside of that line. It's a bit closer to the edge of the eyebrow, maybe the edge of the eye socket. So notice that the eyes are not the width of the eye socket. The eye socket is much larger than the eyes itself. Goes all the way around here. You can feel for it. You can sort of tap for it and work out where the bone is. So that's going this way. Good things to note. Going now in a vertical, so we've got the top of the head. Very generically, one might say that the nose is halfway, although we know from people that some people have much shorter, some people have much longer noses. This can all be so variable, but what you can use is the ear, because the ear is incredibly variable as well. And people's ears correspond to their own faces. So people with larger ears, like mine, for example, have larger noses. People with smaller ears have smaller noses. So you can use this line coming across and this line coming across to work out how large this should be. And be aware that the nose has several planes to it and it's quite a specific structure, but maybe just keep it consistent, use one specific point. And then you've got sort of halfway of the whole face, halfway of this part, the lower half of the face, and then halfway again of this particular part of the face. You'll find the middle of the lips, this horizontal line between the middle of the lips. So you can use that to invent faces. That will be a generic structure which reads proportionally as generally correct. The other really nice thing to look for is, if you're, again, this only works if you're looking at someone straight on. Well, it kind of can work. These things, take them with a pinch of salt, but the corners of the lips sometimes coincide with the pupils. So if you're wondering where to place the pupils, this is quite a nice line. And don't forget, I explained it before, but so the top of the ear is the eyebrow. It's not the eye. The eye is much lower down. There's a whole lot of space in here. We often end up putting eyes much too high up the head, and maybe making the eye itself larger because we're used to looking at people in the eye. We give it all this importance. It really doesn't warrant that. The eye socket is quite a large space, and this is also incredibly variable. So some people have 3 eye sockets to a head. I think that's my proportions of my own face. You might have 4. So your eye socket proportionally to your head might be 4 of your head. The other really, really important and often neglected thing about portraits is the shoulders. Just in the same way that we couldn't make a figure stand up if we neglected to include the feet, we're not going to make a very well-seen portrait if we neglect to include the sort of bust, where the head is on, what's holding it up. And so consider using some angles. You can come across with a pen like that, and you can kind of work out what this space is and what this space is. Now this is quite variable. The generic is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. However, people are unique. That's the beauty of them. They don't conform to generic proportions. Some people have much wider, larger shoulders, slimmer necks, wider necks. You might not be seeing someone on a flat plane. You might see them doing this, in which case one shoulder is foreshortened and the other is also foreshortened, and you're seeing now the front of this shoulder. And what do you do there? Well, you have to kind of draw it, but you can still use that. So you can say, okay, well, maybe that distance is equal to this distance. You can still use kind of your pencil and a bit of measuring and a bit of angles to work things out. I think that was plenty of information on that, and we're going to launch into drawing some actual faces now. So we're going to look at how to draw a portrait, just a sort of general way to make up a portrait. I'm going to start with a kind of oval shape, and right off the bat I'm going to consider the neck, the 2 muscles on either side of the neck, the back of the trapezius and the collarbones, just to give us some context here. And then we're also going to consider the midline of our portrait. Now I'm drawing someone facing us. We're also going to consider where the eyebrows are. Like I said, they're sort of about halfway, so we're going to do this. This is if we were on the same level as our subject, as our portrait. If we were on a different level, so we were underneath them, their eye line might be doing something like that. Their midline would still be like this, and we might have their nose, their mouth. They could be turned to the side, so they could be sort of looking over this way. They could be looking down, like that, and you'd get the ears coming up here or down here. The eyebrow and the ear have a very strong correlation. So we're so we've gone halfway like that, halfway like this. I can come halfway. This is a generalized portrait. Some people are not going to have these exact measurements of their features. You can sort of put a generalized ear in what we might want to do. So we've got that. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and split the forehead into sort of thirds. We're seeing this one dead on, and these 2 are falling back away from us in according to perspective, because this is actually a globe. We can also include the eye socket, so he's trying to make a sort of six-sided shape like that. You could consider this. You don't need to draw this necessarily, but it just might help some of you. We're going to make simple shapes here. We're going to make a sort of simple nose shape. Going to make a simple shape up here. Try and go for the biggest shapes first, sort of these big round shapes here. Splitting things up. I might move this line up slightly. And I mean, already, and actually we want to put the hairline in, so we could decide, is this a man or a woman? Are they going to have which kind of hairline are they going to have? I think it's going to be easier if we make it a man. Actually, it looks more like a woman's hair now. Anyway, not to worry, we can adjust all these. We're going to put a light source in. You will have a light source when you're drawing your own portrait, but we're going to put an imaginary light source in. So using that, we can now help to make our portrait 3D, and I'm using some cross-hatching to work out which bits are going to fall in the shadow of that light source. Probably a bit down here. You can also think about the skull in here, and the shape of the skull, and you can define these a bit more. This might come in a bit, so it depends, like I said to you before, what kind of neck someone has. And the trapezius, it does usually, if someone's got their head in a neutral position, have a relationship to the bottom of the chin. It's slightly higher or lower, but it's around there. So we're going to put that over there. And then because of this light, the jaw itself, the head itself, is actually casting a shadow. So we could put that in nice and strong already. And already with nothing really going on in the head, we've already got a head that sort of looks like it's sort of convincing. There's usually a shadow on top of here. It depends where this light is and what's happening and how deep this is. But and this is very, very individual. You have very different ways of showing the neck over here. And also, generally, people might be wearing clothes, actually, so we could sort of get rid of all of that. They're probably, you could say, oh, this person's wearing a t-shirt. You're probably not going to do this with your shirt off, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so we've got a basic shape. We've moved things about. We've kept it very loose. Notice how far back I'm holding my pencil. I'm not being really tight about it. I'm not trying to write anything. When we're drawing, we want the pencil to rest very, very, very lightly in our hands, so we've got maximum kind of flexibility. We're going to notice that the eyebrows, like I said to you earlier, they don't follow the eye socket. They sort of start beneath it and then they go above it, generally. This person is sort of looking like a really cross between a man and a woman at the moment. It really doesn't matter though. Now I might make a line here, and I'm sort of looking at the edge of the mouth, and I'm sort of working out how far down. Maybe this is lower a bit actually. Just thinking about our face. I'm putting a circle in here. Not that we're going to have this person look. If I drew the circle and then drew the eye around it, this is a very startled person, very shocked person. What actually happens is the upper eyelid tends to cover to at least the pupil, and then you see often a little bit of white on the underside. So that's the general neutral position for the eye to be in. What you will end up with, if you choose to do a self-portrait, is a expression on your face which looks very, very intense, because you will be looking at yourself. So your expression might be less relaxed and a bit more sort of intense, possibly even angry looking. And then you can use that and you can come across, be wary of this when you're drawing your own portrait. So when we're drawing this generalized portrait, we're making all of these lines horizontal because it's easier. In actual fact, in everyone, except for possibly people in the military, no one holds their head straight. Voluntarily, no one holds their head straight. You will all have a slight discrepancy in angle of the angle of your shoulders, the angle of your eyes, your eyebrows. So if you find one of those, if you realise by looking at yourself in the mirror that you naturally hold your head lower on your left hand side, you can then use those lines and they'll go all the way through. So they'll go right down the face. You can use them for the nose, the mouth and the chin and everything. But we're drawing this person in a relaxed way, but this person, I guess, holds their head in a bit of a better way. And we can come down here, we can get a bit more into the nose. We might be using the space between the eyes to work out what's happening to the nose. Just drawing a little loop here. This is my sort of, I mean, people have very, very different nostrils. It's quite interesting to look at the nostril and work out, is the philtrum lower than the edge? Is the middle of the nose lower than the sides? Is it higher? How wide is it? How slim is it? How is there a big highlight here? There's often a very, very clear highlight on the nose. It's protruding, so it's catching a lot of light. It's protruding from the face. And then it itself, just like the jaw, because it sticks out from the face, it casts a shadow. We also have the philtrum there. And I'm using a bit of cross-hatching here, which is just using parallel lines and going over each other. You don't have to do that. You could use just a darker line, so you could just go like this. You could just show shadow by pressing a bit harder with your pencil, or you could smudge like I did down here. You could shade and then smudge. Lots and lots of different ways. Anyway, we're going to move on to the mouth, and I'm using the pupils to tell me where the absolute edges of this mouth are. Now this is not necessarily true for most people, but you can use it as a sort of vague marker and then see how things go. The top lip I'm making darker and slightly slimmer than the bottom lip. And we're going to put a bit of shadow underneath the bottom lip again. It's protruding. We're going to bear in mind that this is slightly to an angle, so we might put a little bit more shadow over there. Then we might have a highlight for the chin, and then we might have shadow as we go into the jaw. And also I'm thinking about the muscles of the face. So you've got these muscles, and I'm trying to sort of just gently go round with my pencil in the way that the muscles go. Just to sort of provide a little bit of volume, can be quite useful. So we're going to have a highlight on there, but we go a bit darker here. You might have a bit of darkness here just to show that the cheek is protruding out. There might be a little bit of shadow there. Might be a little bit. There's often quite a lot of shadow here. Like I told you before, the face tends to slope off quite sharply and towards the sides of the face. And then we're going to make the ear nice and three-dimensional. So we've got the tragus. I don't know all the aspects of the ear, but again, I'm making sure, coming back and making sure things relate. So you can just kind of make sure you look very carefully at your own ear. It will be quite unique, you'll find. The specific arrangement of those folds within the ear cavity are very, very unique to people. But you can generalise them. You know, we've got a lobe, we've got the midsection, and up here we've got, and you might want to show the thickness of that. You know, and they're often a bit asymmetrical. You might have one ear that sticks out a bit further, that seems to be what I've gone for here, and one ear that's a bit flatter, closer to the skull. Now hair, how do we cope with hair? Again, I'm going to say that we simplify that. So we say, okay, there's light hitting the top of the head, maybe the hair has a volume, in which case the front of the volume is not getting light, and it's also potentially casting a shadow. So I'm just delineating those at the moment, which means I'm just drawing a line around the different main blocks and areas of tone. We might have another patch of highlight here, so this might be a mid-tone. This might be quite dark. This might fall away, and you can sort of put the tone, we could put the tone in, and for this I'm using the side of the pencil, and then we could put some texture back in. You go pick out bits a bit darker, keep the light parts really light, and and just be thinking about, I guess, just always keep in mind where the light is coming from. Now we've really ignored the forehead. Don't. It's a fantastically interesting part of the face actually, and it shows a lot of expression. So first you want to come into here, then you want to notice the embossment. I mean, it depends on whether you're drawing a male or a female face, and it depends on what's happening to the light, but usually there's a really interesting bit of shadow coming across the forehead. Lots and lots of interesting stuff happening above the eyebrow, potentially shadows from hair or hairstyles happening at the top of the forehead. Usually a really, really good highlight here and another really good highlight here. You'll notice that if you touch your own forehead like we did in the first session, you'll notice the sort of bumpiness of it, which just like a rock face is going to catch all of these lights and produce some highlights. And again here, so just underneath the eyebrow you have a highlight, and then you have the concavity of the eye socket, so we could come into that a bit more. And also don't leave the whites of the eye white. They have shadows in them as well. They're not necessarily. There are going to be some highlights in the eye, and some of them are going to be as light as the highlights over here and here and over here, but not all of them. So you can't, if you want to show your highlights very strongly, make sure that there are less of them. Basically, put your shadows in darker to show your highlights more strongly. Now at this stage of the drawing we might want to take a rubber. I'm actually going to go a little bit further first and suggest that we include the background and the tone of the background in our drawing. So got the light coming from here, so it might be hitting the wall behind. What you might find is that on the lighter side of the person's face or your own face, the wall or the area behind is a bit darker. Just like the face has got a lighter side and a darker side, the wall might not be one uniform tone. It might not all be grey. It might be slightly darker on one side than the other. I'm using the oil in my finger to smudge that through. You could use a tissue. It would be a bit more archivally better. You might prefer not to get so messy. So I might just leave that a bit like that. Because having something behind, actually, also don't be afraid to go quite dark. Sort of over exaggerating the tone of things can be really useful. I'm going to go really dark here because I've been a bit tentative, and we've got a rubber, so it allows me to put these highlights on the hair maybe a bit more strongly and start working in with the rubber. And we're also going to maybe start putting a few more details, getting a bit more considerate with our shadows now, a bit sort of darker, and also just the eyelid. Let's break it down, same as the forehead. We've got the top of the eyelid, the side of it and the other side of it. The eye is doing what it's doing. If you're seeing it straight on, this is what it looks like, and it's the same as the mouth. Whereas if you're seeing it from the side, one of these will be elongated, so you might have the side of the eyelid, the top of it, and then a very small section for the inside bit of it, and you might be seeing the eye doing something like this. Lashes there, and this would be the nose. Does that make sense? Hopefully. It's quite... Anyway, so yeah, we're going to add a bit more shadow, and also remember that this is kind of concave. Might get a bit darker with these eyebrows. Might get a bit darker here. Might get a bit darker in the pupil. Careful the pupil. The pupil is really going to tell you where this person is looking. The insides of the eyes are going to be quite dark. I mean, these inner corners here is what I mean. So if that... Also notice how I'm not doing one side of the face or one thing. I'm sort of hopping around, making sure if I'm drawing one eyebrow, I'm always thinking about the other eyebrow, and I'm not getting stopping too much in one place. I think we might need a bit more highlight on this nose. So you might want to consider these highlights again. You might want to get down that quite dark. This person's got a kind of cheeky grin. Also with the mouth, just quickly, so we've got this is the middle of the top lip. We usually come out like this. We've got this area, this other area, and we've got a kind of long area down here, so this is a completely wonky mouth. And you have these lines that kind of go out like this, and then you've got the bottom lip, which kind of does that. You can have a play with drawing those in different ways. Think about a sort of grapefruit segment. Maybe I want to make this person have a bit more lip like that, and sort of getting this a bit bigger maybe. You know, you can really change someone. Don't be worried if you haven't got it right. And again, there's going to be a highlight on this. This is a very, very convex surface, so there's going to be a highlight here. So we're going to shade under here, and we're going to shade around here. None of which is going to be as dark as the shadow underneath it, but it's still going to produce the effect of three-dimensionality, hopefully. And again, with going around the muscles, side of the face, the neck, might still be in shadow, and no, it might not be as dark as this. We're going to have to put... So keep in mind that if you've gone really dark in one area of shadow, the areas of shadow that are sort of that same tone, you're going to have to re-darken those as well. And I'm just going to smudge that. We're sort of losing a bit of those, so we'll get those back a bit. And again, I just think that whole... So you can hold the pencil quite far away, and I'm just sort of darkening this whole side of the face. And then, you know, you can come back and find that maybe, like I was talking about before, the corner of the occiput, I mean not the occiput, the eye socket has a highlight on it, and maybe, you know, there's a highlight that transverses the forehead. You may want to think about the texture of the clothes that someone's wearing. So, you know, is there a very clear shadow on, you know, is this, what are they wearing, and you know, just to conclude it. So hopefully that's inspired you to go ahead and draw a portrait of yourself or someone that you're quarantined with, or to make up your own faces, and I hope you enjoy.